Hi, today we are in San Mateo in the SignalFx office. Hi Karthik, who are you and what do you do?
Hi, Martin. Thanks for coming to visit us at our office.
Sure.
I'm the CEO and co-founder at SignalFx.
When did you start this company and what made you start a company at all?
We started the company almost 3 years ago in January 2013, and my co-founder had been at Facebook for several years and had built the monitoring systems at Facebook, which was a very state-of-the-art, different approach to solving monitoring compared to the monitoring solutions that had been on the market for 20 or 30 years. So he and I got together and spent some time looking at the broader market, the trends that were affecting the market, the move towards cloud and software as a service, and felt that the kinds of problems that Phil had at Facebook were the kinds of problems that everyone was beginning to see, and we thought there was an opportunity to start a company around it, and so we decided to start SignalFx.
Cool. Karthik, what is your background and how did it prepare you for starting your company?
I've been at startups pretty much my entire career. At least when I've started at the companies, they've been startups. Right out of college, I joined a company called LoudCloud, which was in the cloud computing space before cloud computing really existed as a market. In fact, we had the name cloud in our name, LoudCloud, back in 99, 2000. I was there for a few years, then I went to VMware, and I was at VMware for a long time. I started when the company was still relatively small. It was a startup. And got to grow up with the company and see it go through various stages of growth. And by the time I left, it was almost a 10,000 person company. So that was a real highlight, being able to be a part of a company from the early days and see it through to become a fairly substantial and significant player in the industry. Then I went to another startup called Delphix for a few years, but had always wanted to start my own company. And then when Phil and I started to talk about building SignalFx, everything just seemed to click, and it seemed like the perfect opportunity to go, realize my dreams of being a founder and build a company of our own. And so Phil and I decided to start SignalFx.
Cool. Can you shine some light on the first 12 months or so of starting the business and the operations? How was it like?
Yeah, it's actually pretty boring for the most part. Our model is a little bit different every model is unique here in Silicon Valley, but Phil and I were able to raise money right away. So the two of us had, I think, because we'd both been in the Valley for a long time, and Phil had a lot of credibility around the technology because he built a similar kind of solution at Facebook, we were able to raise money right away before we hired our team. And so we had the luxury of taking a little bit of time to build the right product and do it thoughtfully. And so from the time we started the company until we launched the company, it was almost a full 2 years. So the first year, really a lot of it was laying the foundation, determining what the technology architecture was going to look like, recruiting our initial group of engineers, building out the core technology, and getting to a point where we could begin to go and recruit beta customers. But the first year, it was pretty much all product development. Beyond the very beginning, there was the fundraising process, and then once that was done, it was pretty much just building.
And when did you start talking to the initial customers?
Well, we had beta customers. I think we started with our first beta about a year and a half after we started the company, and roughly, about a year and a half after beginning. And I guess the question, how did we find these customers, or what?
No, just when did you start looking for them? So it's 1.5 years.
Yeah, we wanted our product to be far enough along that we could actually deliver value to customers, but we didn't want to wait so long that we would go too far down a path that wasn't necessarily appropriate for the marketplace. So it's a very fine line to walk. We felt we hit that point, about a year and a half in, where we had enough of a core technology that could actually solve problems for customers who had a big enough pain point in the areas that we were addressing. And so we found some of these early customers who were willing to invest the time in a young company and be design partners to us and work with us on our beta. And so it was about a year and a half in that we found them.
And what was the customer feedback like? Did they say, wow, this is really awesome? Or did they say, well, you're on a good track, but actually we would like to change this and this feature because in another way it would solve our pain points even more efficiently?
Yeah, I think generally the overall feedback was very positive. Customers have, since the very first customers who signed up, loved the product and loved the space that we're in. There's always feedback, and the feedback tends to be in places that you didn't expect, right? So little things that you miss because you have you think about the product the way that you would use it, and then you go to a different organization that has a different model and maybe a different process or a different way of doing things, and you have to sort of adjust a little bit to help solve their problems in the ways that make sense for their organization. So those were the kinds of things that we had to build small features to help our product integrate better into a customer's environment and address some scenarios that maybe we hadn't thought about. But the core concept, the core product, the core value proposition, we've never wavered from 3 years ago, almost 3 years ago, what we thought the value would be continues to be where most people are getting value today and what people are excited about today. It's on the perimeter. There were a number of things that, as you engage with customers, you realize, oh, we really need to add these things because it'll make it much easier for our customers to use and deploy and get the value out of our product if we add these additional components.
Karthik, can you please elaborate a little bit on the value proposition? So with what type of pitch are you currently targeting your customers?
Yeah, so SignalFx is a monitoring service for modern applications. And so we are not focused on monitoring your traditional enterprise apps like SAP or Oracle. There are plenty of companies that have been doing that for the past 30 or 40 years. What we do is, as you're building the next generation of new applications, if you're moving to a cloud architecture, or even if you're running in your own data center, but you're building a modern application that has microservices or open source or it's just distributed in nature, it's a very different challenge monitoring these modern apps versus traditional apps. And the big differences are, number one, these applications tend to be updated a lot more frequently. So instead of doing 1 or 2 updates a year, you see updates that happen once a week, once every couple of weeks. Number two, they tend to be more complex applications where it's not just one app running on one monolithic app on one machine. They tend to be service oriented, so you could have multiple services all communicating with one another. So when something goes wrong, you have to understand and pinpoint, did it go wrong in service A or service B, and how does that affect your entire chain of services. And then the third thing that's fundamentally different is these apps tend to be distributed. So you have, because VMs and containers are so lightweight and it's so easy to spin up in a cloud environment, you can have applications that have dozens, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands of components. And so in that world, if you have to monitor a large, complex, rapidly changing environment, our belief is that the only way you can do that is through analytics. And you need to collect a bunch of information across all these different systems, perform real-time analytics on it so that you can more proactively identify trends and patterns as they emerge in your environment. And that's really our specialty. SignalFx is, we solve the monitoring problem, but we do it through analytics. And so our customers, the benefit that they get is, number one, they get real-time, complete visibility into everything that's happening to their applications. So keep in mind, most applications these days are living, breathing organisms, and more it's critical to a business, right? It's not like in the old days you have some back office application that is unavailable for a little while, and it's a nuisance to people, but today these applications are your business. And if you have problems with it, then it materially impacts your business. And so you want to understand everything that's happening as it's happening. So we provide that visibility. We provide very high quality alerting. And so instead of getting alerts every time some random component is failing, you get alerts when meaningful trends are happening, like a significant subset of users in a particular region connecting with a particular device are experiencing larger than normal latencies. That's something that you care about. And so those are the sorts of things that we help our customers really understand very, very, very quickly and very effectively.
If I, as a customer of yours, for example, have a very distributed kind of API system, how do I set up your SignalFx service?
So there are lots of different ways of doing. We have technologies that we provide out of the box. We have an open source agent that a lot of our customers use. It's one line command to get it installed, and it collects all of the infrastructure metrics. It collects a bunch of application metrics if you're running open source components, if you're running MySQL, Postgres, Elasticsearch, Kafka, Cassandra, any of these common open source platforms will collect metrics from that out of the box and give you comprehensive analytics and dashboards around it so you can understand what's happening to those. For your custom apps, so for your APIs, you probably have some of those metrics put into log files. And so we have log scrapers that can take those metrics, count them, and send them into SignalFx. Or you can just send metrics directly into SignalFx from your application. So every time an API is called, for example, you can send a metric into SignalFx that measures how long it took to process that request, include a number of dimensions around it, like which customer made that request, what kind of, what region are they coming from, And then once all that data is in SignalFx, you can start to slice and dice it in meaningful ways. As events are happening in your environment, you can see it in SignalFx.
Who are your target customers, and how do you basically acquire them?
Yeah, our target customers are it's basically anyone building an application could use SignalFx. And there's a lot of application development happening here in the technology community, obviously. And so everyone here is a potential target for us. But more and more we see traditional enterprises also investing a lot in software development because, as our investors, Mark Andreessen and Ben Horowitz like to say, software is eating the world and every company is becoming a software company. And so as they're investing in new software, they also need a system like SignalFx to be able to observe as their software is out in the wild, the operational characteristics of the software, performance metrics, understand how their the applications are scaling, all of these things that they need to understand. They could use SignalFx to do it. But the second part of the question, how do we acquire the customers? I think we're a SaaS service. Our customers, we do all of the traditional marketing that you would expect a business to do. We have demand generation programs. We have a more concentrated community of buyers today. It tends to be operations teams. Some people also call them DevOps development teams. So there are conferences where they tend to cluster, and so we're present at those conferences. We also have a tremendous amount of word of mouth with our existing customers. We have very happy customers, and they tell their peers, and then they come and they find us. And so we've got a lot of inbound, people finding us, hearing about us, coming to our website and signing up for a trial. We have a free trial, so it's a very lightweight process. Someone can come and sign up and immediately get value from the product and get a sense of the value they can get from us. So it's a very low friction, very easy way to get started. It's not a heavyweight sales engagement like classic enterprise software.
And are you also using distributional partners like consulting companies or so?
As a young company, the most important thing is to understand your own model very well first, I believe. And so we've only been selling for 6 months, right? We launched in March. We have built out a sales team it's an exceptional sales team, and we're really understanding all the nuances of our go-to-market motion ourselves. But absolutely, I think over time we would, there are lots of opportunities to work with distribution partners and services partners. But right now our focus is on understanding our own model very, very well before we start engaging with partners.
Makes sense. Karthik, you said that you are basically a SaaS model, yeah? What are the price drivers in your revenue model?
The way our product is priced, it's based on the amount of data that customers send us. And we've done a lot of things to make it very fair and easy for customers to control what data they send into SignalFx. And the reason we do it this way, most traditional monitoring solutions price based on the number of servers that you're running. Unfortunately, that doesn't work as well in a modern cloud environment because, first of all, these environments tend to be elastic. We talk to so many customers where they'll have, they could double or triple the number of VMs in their application on a daily basis. They'll scale up and they'll scale down. During peak hours, they'll spike up and then they'll come down. So the host count is a lot more fluid than it used to be, and so it's not quite as predictable a metric of usage as it used to be. And secondly, not all hosts are created equal anymore because you have some applications that you really, really care about and you want to collect a ton of data around those, and other applications that you don't that are not critical and you don't collect as much data. And so it's not very fair to price the same for both of those. So what our customers do, they can decide to send whatever data they want, and because ultimately the primary cost of a solution like this is data storage, we just charge them on the number of data points that they send in, right? The data rate. More data they send in, our storage costs are higher. We have to retain that for our customers, and we tell them, okay, then there's a higher cost or higher price. The less you send in, the less we have to store, the cheaper it is for the customer. And so it's a very fair model for customers. They can decide what they send, they can decide how they want to send it, and they can dial it up or dial it down, at a moment's notice.
Karthik, you said that you are basically doing analytics based on the apps and pinpointing where there might be an issue. Are you also doing predictive analytics for seeing maybe some patterns between your customers and seeing, actually there might be an issue for that and that kind of apps, and there's an overlap in the usage of similar apps between some of those customers? I see an issue arising at one customer, therefore I maybe will predictively tell another customer there might be an issue coming around. this is how we should solve it.
We don't do that because for a number of reasons. Number one, our customers are very sensitive about data privacy, right? And so we even anonymize, there's no pattern matching between different customers. It's completely isolated, and there's no no comparison of one customer to another. But secondly, I think one of the things that's fundamentally different is every application is unique. And we have a massive fragmentation in the number of applications today compared to 20 years ago. 20 years ago, everyone was running packaged software. And so you could look at Oracle trends across 10,000 customers. But today, Salesforce is very different from Workday, which is very different from Facebook, which is very different from Google. And they're all unique applications that have their unique workload characteristics in unique hardware configurations. And so it doesn't make as much sense anymore to do those patterns across customers. That said, there could be some benchmarking sorts of things down the road, but at this point we're focusing more on giving the tools to the customers, the exploratory tools, so they can richly understand their own data and look at the patterns in their own data and draw conclusions from that, rather than trying to solve a problem of looking at patterns across customers.
Karthik, what have been the major obstacles over the last 3 years, and how did you overcome them?
Well, I think with any enterprise business, one of the biggest question marks is what your go-to-market model is going to look like. I think when we started the company, we had a lot of conviction that that there was a huge need for a product like what we built. And I think that's been validated over and over again the more we talk to customers and the more we're out in the marketplace. I think the big question mark in the early days was, what does our go-to-market motion look like? How do we sell more to mid-market accounts, enterprise accounts? Where is the interest going to be? And so that in the early days, you have to spend a lot of time experimenting with different accounts. For us, it's turned out that there are all sorts of segments. We've got some great large customers that are traditional enterprises and large web scale organizations that where they're essentially replacing their entire monitoring systems with SignalFx. We have mid-sized customers that are they move a little bit more quickly, and the deal sizes are not quite as big, but they want to have more of that transactional motion. And so we've seen both models, and then I think figuring out how to structure our team so that we can best equip both of those segments to be successful has been kind of our biggest learnings over the past year. And I wouldn't say it's a challenge, but I would say that was the big question mark when we went into our launch is, what kind of go-to-market motion do we need to build for these different segments? Should we focus more on one or another, or will there be an opportunity in both? And we've certainly seen, customers across the entire spectrum. And so designing the right go-to-market organization to support all of those customers has been probably the biggest area of investment for us as a company in the past 6 months.
And what type of experiments did you do in order to validate your go-to-market strategy?
With sales, it's very easy. You see are customers, signing up for your service? Are they willing to pay you? And so the experiments are I think you experiment with messaging and you see which messages work. You experiment. In my experience, one of the things that we did very well is we hired some exceptional people in the field who are very thoughtful, listen well, very intelligent, and they have almost qualities like stem cells. They can adapt and become whatever model you need them to become. And it was an incredible luxury to have people like that in the early days, because we were able to really listen to customers, observe the patterns that were coming in, and be able to figure out, okay, well, this is how we need to design our go-to-market motion, versus assuming that it was going to be one way or another. I think we were able to adapt very quickly based on what we saw in the market.
And how did you find those generalist salespeople?
We interviewed a lot of people, and I think we were just fortunate that we found some really high quality individuals who were willing to come work with us.
Cool. Karthik, this is your first company, and
Yes.
That you started for yourself. What type of advice could you share with other people thinking about starting a company?
So lots of things. I can spend a lot of time talking about this. I think I think what most entrepreneurs will say, I'll echo as well. I think number one, you have to be very passionate about the idea, because it is like a marriage. You're in it forever, and you need to be excited about the team that you're starting with. So the co-founder chemistry has to be very, very strong. You have to really love what you're doing, whether that's the product and the technology that you're building or the team that you're building. So I think that's absolutely critical. I think another thing that I would suggest to everyone is that don't forget to enjoy the journey, because I think a lot of people get so focused on and stressed about the outcome, and that's natural. Everyone, you're always trying to create the best organization that you can, but it's a beautiful journey. I think for me, Mondays are my best day of the week. I get to come and work with a fantastic group of people. We get to pick, Phil and I get to pick who we want to work with every day. We get to really influence in a meaningful way the culture and the values that we care about. And that's a really beautiful thing. And I think you have to stop and smell the roses sometimes. And that's one thing I think a lot of entrepreneurs forget to do. I think the third thing I would say is that, every company is like a snowflake. It's all unique. Every company is absolutely unique. And people tend to pattern match, and you'll meet a lot of really smart people who have had great experiences and been very successful, who will try to prescribe their approach to your company, and everything changes. There's always some dimension that's changed. It could be the exact same technology in space from 10 years ago versus today. Well, the markets are fundamentally different 10 today versus 10 years ago. Your personalities are going to be different from other personalities. Your founding team and culture, everything is going to be unique. So you really have to understand and introspect very well. Who are you? What do you do very well? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What does your market truly look like? What's different about your market today versus 5 years ago, 10 years ago? And come up with a unique strategy, because you are unique. Your situation is unique. And you can get incredible input and advice from people, but all of that input and advice comes with a bias. And if you understand that bias, you can then tease out the bias and just try to see which of these things are applicable to my world and which are not. But oftentimes it means you have to make a decision that is a lonely decision, because it's based only on your company and what you have to do. But it's very, very important that you make that decision on what's best for your company, not based on what other people are telling you. So I think that's a very important thing to do when you're starting a company. And then I think the last thing I would suggest is, from a personality point of view, I think you have to really, really enjoy the wins a lot more than you get down by the losses, because every company has its ups and downs. And as you go through the life cycle of a company, early on, by its very nature, if you're in a market that's a new market that people haven't figured out as the big market yet, you're going to have more people not understanding what you do. If everyone understands what you do, then you're, someone else who's bigger and has more capacity to fulfill the demand is going to win the market. So your timing has to be right. Where in the beginning, you grow as the market is growing, and that necessarily means in the early days you're going to have, fewer wins, but you have to really relish the wins. That's another thing that I would suggest to people. But,
Karthik, you said that every Monday you are very happy to come to the office, work with great people, and shaping the company and culture. What do you do to shape the culture of the company?
I think it starts first of all with who you hire. That is, culture is, it's not something that you write up on a wall with a few bullet points. It has to be embedded in everything you do, every decision you make, every person you hire, what behaviors you embrace and reinforce, and which behaviors you try to eliminate. I think it starts with the people that you hire. So you have to be very prescriptive about what are the cultural attributes that you care about. When we interview people, we always have at least one person do a fit screen, culture screen. I interview everyone that comes into the company, and I'm always the final culture screen. And we're very prescriptive about what are the cultural attributes that we look for, and that is very, very important. We've turned away a lot of people that are incredibly talented individuals, but we felt that they didn't map to the kind of company and the culture that we wanted to build. So for us, there are things like we really care about intellectual curiosity. And to someone, for example, engineers that ask questions about the business and our business model are candidates that we really like. If there's a very talented engineer that shows no interest in the business, it really sways things to the other, because we want everyone at our company to operate as business owners, and we screen for that from the very beginning. And similarly on the sales side, when we're interviewing salespeople, we like them to ask and want to understand product strategy, and that way we get everyone who, when they're at the company, they're custodians of the business, and they may be wearing a particular hat to be a salesperson or an engineer for their day-to-day jobs, but if they see something that they question, they're not afraid to ask the question, and then collectively as a team we'll make better decisions because we've got a variety of perspectives. So that's one. Independent thinking is another. We really, because as a startup, you have to take risks and you have to go against the grain sometimes, and you have to make non-obvious conclusions. And so we really try to, especially in leadership positions, find people who are creative and will connect the dots in ways that other people don't. And so if we learn interesting things in an interview and we see different perspectives that we hadn't seen before, that's a net positive for us. So there are all of these sorts of things that we do to try to screen for culture. So who you hire, the behaviors that you enforce, I think who you promote into management positions is one of the most important factors in building a culture, because then everyone around the company will see these are the behaviors that are rewarded. The behavior of managers is also very significant, because that's again what people look at as this is what the company values, and so you have to be very careful about who you promote, what behaviors they're displaying to the rest of the company, how you allocate different responsibilities to people, who you give what projects, again is who it reflects to the rest of the company. What qualities do we admire and respect? If we have a really big problem that we need to solve and it's very important for the company to solve it, and we give these 3 people the role of solving that problem, it tells the company, these are the 3 that we're trusting to solve this big problem, and they're obviously skills that they have that the company really appreciates and respects. And this isn't just about technical skills, it's technical skills, it's interpersonal skills, it's just, all of these things sort of become your culture, and I think it really starts with the people who you hire, who you promote, who you give certain roles to, and then myself and Phil, my co-founder, how we act every day is, I think, and people look to us too, and the things that we value, and how we treat people and treat partners and look at the opportunity is, I think, something that people look at as examples. So there's so many different things that are involved in building a culture, but I think the key is you just have to keep reinforcing certain tenets, and do that across the entire company.
Karthik, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge.
Yeah, thank you,
It was
Martin.
really a pleasure.
Very nice to meet you.
Thank you, welcome. And next time you are starting a company, you should really focus also in the beginning on the corporate culture, that you are hiring the right people, not only based on the skills, but also based on the attitude, because you want to minimize the asshole factor, for example, or that they work and be very curious about what they are working on. Thank you so much.
Great.